we weren't allowed to have Jobi McAnuff around us. Their way of doing it was just punishing Jobi by sending him down the bottom and he can rot.
The way you've treated things like that shouldn't happen, not to professionals like that.
I remember just getting back on the coach and one of the Italian guys just basically said that he's had a phone call and we're not allowed to go home.
Essentially being held hostage in a sense. It was mad that happened.
I think he came to the training ground and he was like, I want to see Eye of the Tiger. I want someone to say, I want to go home.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 6 of The Circus Upstairs.
I'm James Masters, journalist and still very happy Leyton Orient fan.
I'm Matt Simpson, author of the book Leyton Orient Greats, the reference to which was once removed from Wikipedia very mysteriously until I discovered it was actually removed by fellow Orient author and self-proclaimed Orient historian Neil Kaufman.
Is that true?
That is genuinely true. And what I want to know is what upset him so much about the quality of my book that he felt he had to go into Wikipedia and remove all reference to it. It must have really, really, really upset him.
I've only ever had good experiences with him. He's always been very nice to me. So I can only imagine it must have been something to do with your prose.
Side with him, why don't you? Okay, so could you remind us where we're up to in our story?
Absolutely, Matt. So after a strong start to the season where Orient won their first 5 games, scored the best goal that's ever been scored, they predictably dropped off, and with heavy interference from owner Francesco Becchetti and his entourage, Orient began to flounder. We had the Albanian authorities closing in on Becchetti, with them issuing an arrest warrant for fraud and closing down his Aegon TV channel. So I guess it's going quite well. Going well so far, yeah?
So where we left it was Alessandro Angileri, the Thinking Man's CEO, telling us that there was absolutely no interference in team selection, that only the manager picks the team. But something that was very curious to Orient fans was that Jobi McAnuff had not been selected for any game so far this season, either in the team or on the bench. Why was that curious, James?
Well, I mean, Jobi McAnuff was a player who came in with tremendous pedigree to the club. Is being paid handsomely. Had a great career up to that point. Played West Ham, Reading, Watford, Wimbledon. Very well respected player. Someone who you'd want in your team. Quite simply, he was an outstanding player for that division. So for him not to be playing, there were big question marks.
Yeah, and given we hadn't won any games in September, it was a bit weird. And Dave Victor also thought it was a bit weird. Here's what he had to say.
We lost at Exeter away, and I spoke to Ian, and I like Ian, but he's not the sort of fella you'd want to cross. That's fair to say. And I think every game up until then, I've been asking about Jobi McAnuff. And after the interview, he said, I went back up into the stand, and Ian called me over. So I went back down to see Ian. He said, Dave, why do you keep asking me about Jobi? So I said, well, he's a big player, and he's not in your, where is he? He's obviously a big earner as well as a big player and a good player. And I suppose he's not injured. And the question is, where is he? And he said, I can't tell you. He said, I can't pick you. I can't pick him. And I can't tell you I can't pick him. And don't ask me again. So I didn't. I'll have to, almost respect for Ian from that point. But I think it was a real reflection of just how little control Ian had on the squad and what was happening.
So here's Lee Harrison to explain what was going on.
We weren't allowed to have Jobi McAnuff around us. He was to train down the bottom with the youth, which Ian wasn't happy with. Figured if we had a player of Jobi's calibre around the club that he should be in with us. But it wasn't really a battle we could have early on.
Were you ever told why Jobi wasn't allowed in the team?
I think for what they thought they paid Jobi and they got relegated, they didn't think he was value for money. So it was almost like he'd upset them by not being good enough for them. So their way of doing it was just punishing Jobi by sending him down the bottom and he can rot. It just became a weekly thing. Ian would always ask the question to Vito or one of the other ones that was hanging on, and the answer would always come back, no, he doesn't play, he's not involved. So, and Jobi was brilliant with us. He'd come in every morning and Ian would explain it to him. And Joe went, look, no problem. I know it's not you, so I'll just get on with it.
So Lee mentioned someone called Vito there. That's Vito Micheli, like the accent. So he's going to become an important character as we go forward. So I'm going to let Howard Gould, community liaison officer and part of the backroom staff, to explain who he was.
Yeah, he came in and under the auspice of a COO, apparently, the operations officer. He was the mouthpiece. He was the interim. Everything had to go through Vito, and I think that went for everybody else in the office too.
Yeah, so Vito was the chief operating officer stroke Becchetti fixer. Remember his name. But let's go back to the Jobi McAnuff saga and get Andy Hessenthaler's take on the situation.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was a real tough decision. I mean, I get on well with Jobi, a fantastic footballer. He's had a great career. So to see the way he was being treated, it was tough, But, it was, again, it was difficult for us because our hands were tied and it was a situation, it will come down to money in the end. And whether the chairman liked him or not, he had his say. And it was difficult for us as a management team to see that happening. And he needed to be shown, for me, more respect because of who he is and what he's done in the game.
Here's Matt Baudry on what was going on.
Jobi McAnuff at the time, that was training with a youth team, because he blamed him for the relegation and stuff. So I think for some reason he had in his mind that because he invested that season before into players like Jobi and Jay and Darius, and it didn't go the way we wanted in League One, kind of like put the blame on it when it was just like the whole team really together. So it was not Jobi's fault, like we got relegated or anything. But chairman has had this in his head.
And we also asked Howard Gould for his perspective on the Jobi situation.
We know Jobi McAnuff. You can see what a gentleman he is, the way he speaks, the way he holds himself. And that's exactly what he does as a professional footballer. He would come in from training from the youth. He would have his lunch. He would just talk normally. He wouldn't, he'd still smile. He'd try and be as strong as he could be. He'd say to me, don't worry about anything. Things will be all right. He was, I don't know how he kept so positive. The way he was treated, things like that shouldn't happen. Not to professionals like that.
It was like they were cutting off their nose to spite their face.
Not so surprising, but this just seemed like self-destruction, really, because any League Two team with Jobi McAnuff in would just be infinitely better.
It was just petty and vindictive and childish.
All of the above, yeah.
Not Alessandro Angeleri's take on it, who, when asked the question by our friends at Orient Outlook podcast, said this.
Yes, Jobi in August asked us the possibility to train with the club in higher league, Championship League, something like this, no? And he trained. But at the moment, he is part of the club. He trained with the club, and that's it.
Essentially, McAnuff's become a prisoner, unable to escape, unable to leave, unable to play, and just a really sad, sorry state of affairs. It's just really quite horrible to see the way he was treated. But, just on a personal level, that's not how you should treat anybody. I'm sorry, that's just appalling management. Just appalling.
So, back on the pitch in October, things picked up a little bit. We won 2 games, we drew 2, and we lost 2, which left us by the end of the month in 7th place with 26 points from 16 games. So we're still sort of up there, not too bad. But performances were definitely dropping off. And on the last game of that month, 1-0 home defeat to Accrington, Orient were booed off the pitch. You were probably booing, weren't you, knowing you?
I'm not a massive booer. It might surprise you. I think you're a booer, aren't you? Didn't you say you
What?
booed?
I never boo.
No, I don't know. You like to go through every player and tell them of their failings individually.
No, I do that through the medium of my blog. So, into November, things were getting worse for Francesco Becchetti off the pitch. He was asked to attend a hearing in London after the state of Albania issued an extradition request so that he could return to the country to face fraud charges. The Agon channel ceased broadcasting in Italy as well as Albania, which was obviously terrible, distressing news for the 5 or 6 fans of Leyton Orient, the reality show. And I think Becchetti was getting increasingly paranoid about all these things that were going on, and Howard had some good insight into how that was manifesting itself.
He wouldn't trust anything from our kitchen. He would have to have stuff brought in from his own chefs, from wherever they were, wherever he was getting his food cooked. But it was brought in especially for him, and he was paranoid about being assassinated. That's what I heard as well. So that's why he didn't trust our food, and he was worried that he would actually be shot. So he was a paranoid man, mind you, fully deserved.
Yeah, I feel very much that at this point, our crack legal team are going to ask us to present Becchetti's version of events here. So, can you oblige, James?
In a statement, Becchetti reaffirmed his innocence and accused the Albanian government of making baseless accusations against him. The statement added that his Albanian company's assets have been seized and the bank accounts frozen, preventing him from paying staff at his TV company, Aegon TV.
Moving on. In November, we beat Staines Town 6-1 in the FA Cup.
Massive.
Thanks. The next league game is against Hartlepool. What happened in that Hartlepool game?
Well, what we'll say, Matt, is for the first 19 minutes, it was brilliant because Orient led 1-0 through Bradley Pritchard after 13 minutes, and it was all going swimmingly. And then, obviously, Hartlepool came back and won the game 3-1. It was a very poor performance, particularly second half, but it was nothing. I wouldn't say it was any more disappointing than any other performance that Orient had given around that time.
Francesco Becchetti obviously took it more seriously than that and was clearly furious about this defeat and the manner of the defeat, and as a consequence decided that he would not let the team go home. Let's first turn to... We're going to tell this story Rashomon style. I feel like I might have lost a lot of listeners by referring to quite an old Japanese film there, but we're going to tell it from multiple perspectives. And here first is Hess on what happened that day.
Yeah, I remember the game. We actually played quite well. I thought that day was a bit unfortunate. I thought we lost the game, but I thought we had good spells in the game, and it just didn't. It wasn't our day. But I remember just getting back on the coach, and one of the Italian guys just basically said that he's had a phone call, and we're not allowed to go home. We've got to go back to a hotel as a group of players and spend the next few days, at a hotel, and then prepare for each day at training. I believe it's something that's done in Italy. That's what happens in Italy. It's just a way of punishing players to keep them away from their family. But so it was strange, and we did it. We went back to the hotel, as everybody knows, and I actually quite enjoyed it. Actually, being funny about it. Actually, it was only 10 minutes from the training ground, so I didn't have to do a lot of travelling.
And here's Lee Harrison's take on the same incident.
We were travelling back on the bus, and about 2 hours sort of from London, there was a phone call through to Ian. It was, I think Vito might have been on the bus. He might have got the call and then walked down to Ian and said, "The president says we're all to go straight to the hotel at Waltham Abbey, and we stay there for the week as a punishment for losing the game." So he said, I won't take your money, I will take your time away. It was comical, to be fair. We got driven straight to the hotel. So we had just what we had. So I think in the end, we sort of said to Vito, you've got to let the players go home and get some stuff if this is going to happen, because we can't sit in a club tracksuit for 7 days. So, yeah, they were allowed to go. But in the end, I think a lot of the players had they didn't really care about the Italians. Jay Simpson lived about 10 minutes from the hotel. So his week was spent coming in, he'd have his dinner, and then when everyone went to their rooms, he just went home. Which I couldn't believe the Italians didn't realise, because he was turning up in his carpet slippers, like for for pre-match meals and stuff like that. Blatantly just coming straight from home, coming in to have his meal and then going again. I just said it was just their way of doing things, and I think by then we had all the players like Mathieu Baudry, Lloyd James had just had enough. You know, listen, it wasn't a hardship staying in a hotel. It was just the randomness and the whole, ideology of what they were trying to do that people weren't buying into.
What was the reaction when it was announced? Was it announced on the team coach?
Yeah, it was announced on the team coach. I think the ones who hadn't been around the club, like the Paul McCallums and that, were like, I can't believe it. I think the ones who'd been there before were like, well, this just sums it up. I think Hess was the only person who was happy because he was travelling in about an hour and a half from Kent every day. And all of a sudden it condensed his journey time down to about 20 minutes. So I think Hess would have stayed there the whole season. So it must have cost him a fortune to do it. I mean, this was the thing. You were better off spending the money elsewhere on things that needed doing or things you could do than wasting God knows what on a hotel for 7 days. It was just the throwing the money around that just made no sense at a League Two club. I think as the week went on, I think players then started phoning the PFA to say, look, this is ridiculous. We've got families. Some, obviously, like some of them had wives that worked, or they might go out later in the day. They might have to pick up kids from school, so they'd not had a chance to plan anything. So I think they were complaining to Vito and saying, look, this is just, this is not going to work. There's other things we need to do. You've got to give us a heads up if we're going to be doing something like this. So I think they gradually just started going and doing it anyway.
And then here's Matt Baudry's take on what happened.
That Vito that was at the front of the bus and just came and said, just spoke to the chairman, you're going straight to the hotel. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, what we're doing, we're not like Premier League players. So we're not like, we have a wife that works. We need like childcares and stuff like that. So it was just like, what's happening here? So we're quite, at the start, there was quite a bit of people who were like, no chance, like we're not doing it. And obviously there's people that were just more worried of like repercussions and that, because they say, if you don't, like it's going to stop paying us and things like that. So we just have to make a decision together to just go to the hotel and then trying to have discussions with the chairman, but it was quite complicated, yeah.
And let's go back to Andy Hessenthaler again.
That was a strange affair. Obviously, it got out to Sky, and we had Sky cameras pretty much jumping out of the bushes at the hotel, Waltham Abbey, and taking pictures of the players and the staff getting ready to go training from the hotel. So, again, something that I've never experienced before.
I wonder, did you and Ian and the sort of management team, did you have to sort of toe the party line and sort of front up to the players that, this is something that you're also bought into?
Yeah, I mean, we had to. At the end of the day, that was what was told by our owner, by our chairman. That's what we had to do, So we had to do what like anybody would do. He pays the wages, and that's how he felt he wanted to deal with the situation. But it was tough because some of the players obviously didn't. Well, listen, anyone that really agreed, we didn't know nobody agreed with it, but we had to do it, and it was like I say with the player situation, it was almost. We had so many meetings to try and talk to the players and try and reason with some of them in terms of the situation, which again wasn't easy. I remember Jay Simpson. Jay certainly wasn't happy. He wanted to go home and see his family, and so it was a real tough time for all the players really, because they just at the end of the day we just wanted to get on with training and playing football matches and try and do well for the football club, but we just felt we wasn't. Our hands were tied at times, and we couldn't do that. But again, it just shows you the way they did things, or how they wanted to do things. And for me, what a waste of money. That just shows you where there's a lot of waste of money at the football club, paying out for players or the squad and management team to stay in a hotel for a week. What that come to, I wouldn't know, but it certainly wouldn't have come cheap.
So I feel it's incumbent on us to figure out how much it did cost. So I have the Marriott, Waltham Abbey website up in front of me. It seems like quite a decent hotel. They are very fond of various shades of beige in its decor, I would say. It's not the Dorchester. I don't think Mauro Milanese would be that happy there. He is accustomed to higher standards, I think, but it looks a perfectly good hotel to me. There were 24 players and staff who stayed there. I'm going to assume that most of the players shared a room. Some of the staff didn't. So I'm thinking 15 rooms. A double room is £132 a night. I think they were there for about 5 nights. So that comes to £9,900 for the rooms. I'm thinking they probably cracked into the minibar quite heavily, wouldn't you? If you were just stuck there, probably only trained for a couple of hours each day. What else are you going to do? Kit Kats, what, about £8? Pack of artisan crisps, 14 quid. I reckon the minibar bill's got to be a few grand.
I was just checking if you could get a massage or anything or a pedicure, but I don't think they have those services.
I don't think they have those services because I have a list of their services up here. They have a restaurant, a fitness centre, an indoor pool, nice, a meeting space, and a dry cleaning service. Feel like they might have taken advantage of some of that. I'm going to say, all told, 20 grand. Or a week of Andrea De Sena's alleged wages in the season before.
I mean, 20 grand's a heck of a lot of money. It was utterly bizarre, this story, because sending them off to a hotel and kind of the way it was framed, I think, was almost like they'd been imprisoned in a hotel for their failings.
So manager Ian Hendon had to front up to the press during this, let's call it a hostage situation. And unfortunately, his interview with Sky Sports is no longer available. So instead, I got one of my mates, Andy, to try and do an impression of Hendon, why not, while reading out a quote he gave in an interview with the Daily Mail.
The owner has had different sporting ventures over the years, and he said sometimes it's good to get together and spend time together. It helps team bonding. When the owner suggested it, I thought, why not try something different? If we win 4 or 5-0, the owner might ask us to move here permanently. We're not trying to hide anything. We're staying at a hotel. There are plenty of army camps I know about in deepest, darkest woods if we wanted to do that.
Yeah, that sounded absolutely nothing like him. But the important quote in there is that Ian Hendon apparently knows plenty of army camps in the deepest, darkest woods. That's weird, isn't it? That's sinister. Do you know plenty of army camps in the deepest, darkest woods?
I can't say I do. Kind of scary.
Is it normal for football managers to know army camps in deepest, darkest woods?
I mean, neither of us have stayed at the Marriott Hotel. Maybe it's a bit scary. I don't know.
So it's a toss-up between staying in an army camp in the deepest, darkest woods or the Marriott Hotel, Waltham Abbey. It's a tough choice.
It's got a lovely swimming pool there, apparently.
So how were the players ever going to get out? There wasn't a time limit put on this imprisonment. So Matt Baudry, as club captain, led a deputation of players to Francesco Becchetti's expensive townhouse in Mayfair to try and see if he could resolve the situation. Here's what Matt said.
Yeah, it was a bit weird. I think me and like 2 or 3 lads, we had to go in London as well, in Mayfair. One of them days we had to go to see the chairman to try and to cancel it, trying to talk him out of it.
So you went to his house in Mayfair?
Yeah, we went to his house in Mayfair.
What's his house like?
It was a nice house, yeah. It was one of them, when from outside you just look at like an old pub, like converted or something. Then inside it was just, yeah, it was amazing.
How did you present your argument to him and how did he take it? Was it just him by himself? Did he have his entourage with him? Did he give you dinner?
No, it was literally just him. I think he had one of them like a all that sitting room in there. So we had to look a bit at the house, but it's like that sitting room was like a sofa and there was like painting frame. I think not one of them painting frames that turned into TV and stuff. I don't know. It's just him really. So he was there. I'm pretty sure it was just him. Yeah, it was just him and us 3, and just speak on the sofa about how the season was going and saying like that the players wanted to go and just he was just asking us questions about why when we're not doing it, why we're not doing it on the pitch, why it's not working and stuff. Which in football is just not like, you can't just point your finger. It's just to find a reason why you're not losing a game. Like, it's just tough. So it was just like always some weird conversation with him.
So I feel like Becchetti has an enormous portrait of himself as the centerpiece of his house.
But you've got this awful image, haven't you, of the workers going to the big boss in his fancy mansion and asking for their freedom.
So it didn't work. They remained in prison. And I think a couple of days later, Becchetti himself came to the training ground. And this is what happened.
I think he came to the training ground and it was like, sometimes his speech were like, didn't know what it was talking about. It was just very, very strange. And he said, I want to see Eye of the Tiger. He was like, I want someone to say, I want to go home, like take responsibility for, and we're going to win on Saturday. And say, is someone's going to tell me this? And I remember Sammy Moore saying that, just put his hand up and say, yeah, it's fine, like, I take responsibility. And then they just say, like, it's fine, you go home then. And I was like, we spent 2 hours with you 2 days ago to try to get you out. But it was just depending on his mood. Like, if he just decided, that's it. Like, you just go home. Like, nothing happened.
And this was Howard Gould's take on that same incident. He was there too.
Everyone looked around, all Becchetti's here, okay. They were having their lunch. Suddenly he belts out in English, I need a leader. I need a leader. Baudry's looking around because he's a captain. And so everyone stops eating and he looks around and what does he mean, you need a leader? So Matthew stood up as the captain and Becchetti went and put his arm on Sammy Moore and he goes, Sammy Moore, you will be my man. And Sammy stood up. He looked at Becchetti, yeah, what do you need me to do? I want you to lead us. You will be our leader. You will go on the pitch. You will shout and you will scream. And Matt Baudry's looking around thinking, hang on, I'm the captain here. And Becchetti hugs Sammy Moore. And he goes, we have our leader. We found our new leader. So I want you to go out. You will shout and you will lead us. And then he just walked off. And Sammy looked around. He shrugged his shoulders. He I don't know what. I'm the leader. I don't know what to do. I just, but I felt, you felt so sorry for Matt Baudry, shrunk into his. You thought, what's going on? And these were strange things that were happening. And the boys just got on with it, just carried on with their lunch and go, what was that all about,
Are you a leader, James?
I think sometimes, yeah, definitely. Sometimes reluctantly as well.
Do you have the eye of the tiger?
In that situation, I think I'd be so desperate to get out of the hotel room that I would probably have done anything to get out of the hotel at that point.
You would still be imprisoned in that hotel then?
But I'd have complimentary bathrobes, so,
One of the journalists who was covering the story for the local press was George Sessions. Here's his take on the Hartlepool debacle.
I remember Ian kind of trying to play it down and it being, it was fine, it was good team bonding. But I felt a bit sorry for him because I think that was when things really went wrong for him personally. And obviously that's Becchetti's fault because he's told him that the whole team needs to go and stay in a hotel. But I just think a lot of the players probably then thought, oh, well, whatever Becchetti says is going to happen. So I think they probably lost a little bit of faith in the end then. But, as a manager, what are you supposed to do? The guy that's paying all your wages turns around and says, you've not performed very well against Hartlepool, you're going to stay in a hotel for a week. I know it's not a bad hotel, but it's just crazy how that could be allowed to happen. Football teams lost the match and then they've not been allowed to go home and they've had to stay in a hotel, which is, I don't know how that wouldn't be that wouldn't be normal in any other walk of life, and it shouldn't be normal in football really, because they're essentially being held hostage in a sense. Really, it was mad that happened.
I think the players should consider themselves lucky they didn't end up in one of the army camps Ian Hendon knows in deepest, darkest woods. Don't know what their problem is. We could talk about this for a long time, but I think we have reached the end of this episode. But just before we close, we wondered if by this point Andy Hessenthaler was actually regretting his decision to join Orient. So we asked him exactly that.
Not really, because it's, I felt it was a challenge, and deep down, I thought we could overcome the situation. I really felt this wouldn't continue the way they were. I thought it would change, and that was obviously never. But I was hoping it was going to. I hope it was going to get better, and maybe it would have been if we'd been successful. But I just don't think, even if we'd been successful, I think that's the way the chairman was. He's, like I said, he didn't know the English game. That's perhaps the way they did things in Italy, and I just don't think he got the grasp of the English football. So it probably wouldn't have changed. But in my mind, I didn't regret it, because I thought maybe he would change. But as you say, in the end, he didn't.
I admire Hess for his positive outlook on life, given that he'd just been imprisoned in a hotel for a week.
Yeah, you would have thought that would have given him a kick up the arse or something, wouldn't you? But that's still to come, of course, Matt.
That is the best segue you have ever done, because I was literally just about to ask you what is going to happen in episode 7.
So in the next episode, we'll have an angry manager squaring up to a fan. We'll have fans waving their mobile phones and singing that they're bored at home games. And we'll have the club owner kicking Hess up the arse after a dramatic Orient victory.
I'm looking forward to all of that. So on that note, we will say thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
Arrivederci.
Your Italian accent has not improved.
I don't know why I waved. I don't know why I felt I had to wave while I said it. No one's looking. It just felt more natural.
It was rubbish.
Yeah.